He should not have said it, but once the words left my mouth, there was no pulling them back. I think your mother is the first person who has ever truly seen me. The silence on the other end of the phone was so heavy I thought the call had dropped. Then Sophia laughed, not the laugh I remembered from our early years, not warm, not amused, sharp. "Wow, Ryan," she said slowly, "you really are pathetic." I gripped the phone harder. "You dumped me," I said quietly. "You walked away like 6 years meant nothing." "That doesn't mean you run to my mother." "I didn't run to her." Another silence, longer this time. Then she said something that stopped my heart cold. "You think she chose you because you're special." Her voice dropped into something almost cruel. "No, Ryan. She chose you because she knows exactly how easy you are to need." The line went dead. I stood in the middle of my kitchen staring at my phone like it had just exploded. For months earlier, I would have done anything to hear Sophia's voice again. Now it felt like touching a live wire, because everything she said was wrong, and somehow also terrifyingly close to the truth. But to explain how I ended up defending my girlfriend's mother to the woman who dumped me, I need to take you back to the moment everything cracked open. The morning her mother rang my doorbell. The breakup happened on a Wednesday, quick, clean, almost surgical. Sophia didn't yell. She didn't cry. She sat on her couch with her arms crossed like she was waiting for a dentist appointment. "I can't do this anymore," she said. 6 years. And that was the sentence that ended it. No warning, no slow conversation, just finished. I remember looking around her living room while she talked. The plant I bought her 3 birthdays ago. The yellow blanket we argued about at IKEA. The framed photo from a lake trip where she was laughing so hard she spilled beer on my shirt. It all looked like someone else's life. "I need freedom," she said, "freedom," like I had been a cage. I asked the only question that mattered: is there someone else? She rolled her eyes. "No, I just don't want to keep pretending this is what I want." Pretending. That word hit harder than the breakup itself, because I had never been pretending. I stood up slowly. No begging, no dramatic speech. Just one sentence, "Okay." Then I walked out. The drive home was silent. No music, no radio, just the hum of the tires and 6 years collapsing in my chest. When I got to my apartment, I didn't even turn on the lights. I sat on the couch still wearing my work boots. I remember staring at the wall and realizing something that hurt more than the breakup. Sophia had never been building a future with me. I had been building it alone. Thursday morning I called in sick, which I never do. I'm an electrical contractor. My job is simple. Wires go where they're supposed to go. Breakers trip when something is wrong. Everything has rules. Everything makes sense. Relationships apparently do not. I spent the morning sitting on my couch wearing yesterday's clothes. Apartment smelled like stale coffee and drywall dust. My phone buzzed a few times. Friends, coworkers, I ignored all of it. Then the doorbell rang once, then again, then a third time like whoever it was had no intention of leaving. I dragged myself to the door and opened it without checking, and froze. Margaret stood there, Sophia's mother, perfect posture, navy dress. Hair pinned back like she had somewhere important to be, which made my messy apartment feel even worse. "Ryan," she said softly. Her voice carried the same calm authority it always had at family dinners. "I'm sorry to show up like this." My brain was still catching up. "Sophia told you." I asked. She nodded. "May I come in?" I stepped aside automatically. I had known Margaret for 6 years. Thanksgiving dinners, birthday brunches, long conversations about work and life. She had always treated me like I mattered, like I wasn't just the guy dating her daughter. Still, this felt different. She walked into my living room slowly. Her eyes scanned the couch blanket, the takeout boxes, the half-drunk coffee on the table, evidence of the worst night of my life. "I heard what happened," she said. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Yeah." Another quiet moment passed. Then she crossed her arms, not angry, holding something in. "I shouldn't have waited this long to say something," she said. That sentence immediately made my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" She looked directly at me, not past me, not around the room, straight at me. And then she said the strangest sentence anyone had ever spoken to me. "Ryan, you're mine now." I blinked. Sorry, what? Her composure cracked for the first time. "I know how that sounds." "I'm pretty sure it sounds exactly like what you just said." She exhaled slowly, then walked closer. "Let me explain." I stayed very still, because every alarm bell in my brain was ringing. "I watched you for 6 years," she said. "At holidays, at dinners, at birthdays." Her eyes softened. "I watched the way you treated my daughter." I rubbed my face. "Margaret, I really don't think this conversation." "She didn't deserve you." That stopped me cold. The words landed heavy between us. "I'm serious," she continued quietly. "I watched you try again and again, while she barely looked up from her phone." Her voice wasn't angry, it was sad and somehow protective. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She hesitated, then told me the part that changed everything. "Because 2 years ago," she said slowly, "I realized something I wasn't supposed to realize." My heart started beating harder. "What?" She held my gaze. "I realized you were the kind of man I should have married." The room went silent. Every instinct in my body screamed that this was wrong. Not awkward, not weird, wrong. "Margaret," I said carefully, "you're Sophia's mother." "I'm also a woman who spent 25 years in a marriage where she felt invisible." Her voice didn't shake, but something deeper lived inside it. "I promised myself after my divorce that I would never ignore real feelings again." I ran a hand through my hair. "This is happening the day after your daughter dumped me." "I know. You don't think that's complicated." She almost smiled. "It's extremely complicated." Then she reached into her purse, pulled out a business card, and wrote something on the back. She placed it on my kitchen counter. "I'm not asking you to decide anything today," she said. "I'm not taking advantage of your pain." She paused. "But I am done pretending I don't feel what I feel." My chest felt tight. "What exactly do you feel?" Her answer came quietly, but with absolute certainty. "I feel like you are the kind of man who builds a life with someone." She stepped toward the door, then looked back once. "And I would like the chance to build one with you." Then she left, just like that. The door closed, and I stood alone in my kitchen staring at a small white card with a phone number written on the back. Part of me knew this was insane, completely insane, but another part of me felt something I hadn't felt in years, seen. I picked up the card, turned it over in my hands, and one terrifying thought crept into my mind. What if the person who understood me best was the woman I was never supposed to fall for? I didn't call her, not that night. Not the next morning either, but the card never left my pocket. Every time I reached for my phone, my fingers brushed the edge of it, like a quiet reminder that my life had somehow split into two paths, one safe, one impossible. For 4 days I tried to pretend the second one didn't exist. Thursday turned into Friday. I went back to work. My job that week was wiring a half-finished apartment complex downtown. Steel studs, open ceilings, loose cables hanging everywhere. Normally I like jobs like that. You could see the skeleton of the place. You could imagine where everything would go, where light would land, where people would live. But that week my mind kept drifting. Every time I climbed a ladder or pulled wire through a conduit, Margaret's voice echoed in my head. "I watched you for 6 years. You're the kind of man who builds a life." No one had ever said something like that to me before. Sophia never had. With Sophia, love always felt like something I had to earn. Like I was trying to pass a test I didn't understand. Margaret had said it like it was already true. That difference scared me more than anything. Saturday night I sat alone in my apartment. The silence felt different now. Not empty, waiting. I took the card out of my pocket and set it on the table. Margaret Collins, executive consultant. Underneath, in blue ink, the number she had written. I stared at it for a long time. This wasn't just calling someone. This was crossing a line. Not just socially. Morally, she was Sophia's mother. That fact kept slamming into my brain like a warning sign, but another memory pushed back. 6 years of trying to build a future with someone who never really wanted one. 6 years of being the only one planning, the only one hoping, the only one staying. My phone was already in my hand before I realized it. I opened the message app, typed something, deleted it, typed again, deleted that too. Everything sounded dramatic or stupid or desperate. Finally, I wrote 2 words, dinner sometime. I stared at the message, then hit send before I could change my mind. The reply came in less than 30 seconds. Tuesday, 7 p.m. I know, a quiet place. My heart started pounding. There was no hesitation in her message, no awkwardness, just certainty. Tuesday came too fast. All day at work my focus was gone. I checked my phone every 20 minutes like I expected her to cancel, but she never did. By 6:30 I was already sitting in the parking lot of the restaurant, an Italian place downtown. Low lights, quiet music. The kind of place people went when they wanted to talk without being overheard. I sat there for 10 minutes just staring at the entrance, telling myself this was ridiculous. She might not even show up. But then the door opened, and Margaret walked in. For a second I didn't recognize her. She wasn't dressed like the woman who hosted family dinners or asked about my job across the Thanksgiving table. She wore a deep red dress that moved when she walked. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders. And the way she carried herself was different too, not careful, confident. When she saw me through the window, she smiled, and something inside my chest shifted. When she sat down across from me, the first few minutes felt strangely normal, too normal. We talked about work, traffic, a new building project she was consulting on, the weather, safe subjects, like 2 people pretending nothing strange was happening. The waiter brought water for me, wine for her. My hands were shaking slightly when I lifted the glass. I hoped she didn't notice, but of course she did. Margaret noticed everything. After the waiter left, she placed her wine glass on the table and looked directly at me. Her expression changed, serious now. "I need to say something before this goes any further," she said. My stomach tightened. "Okay. I meant what I said the other day." Her voice was calm, not emotional, not dramatic, just honest. "I know people will judge us," she continued. "I know Sophia might never forgive me." She paused, but I would regret staying silent even more. I watched her carefully. "Why me?" I asked quietly. That question had been sitting in my chest since the moment she rang my doorbell. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned back slightly and studied my face. "Do you remember Thanksgiving 2 years ago?" she asked. I thought for a second. "Your house, big dinner. Your brother brought that terrible pumpkin pie." She smiled faintly. "Yes." Then her smile faded. "Do you remember how Sophia barely spoke to you the entire night?" I did remember, painfully well. She had spent most of the evening on her phone, texting someone from work. Every time I tried to start a conversation, she gave one-word answers. I nodded slowly. Margaret looked down at her glass for a moment. "That night," she said softly, "I went upstairs after everyone left and sat on my bed feeling angry. Angry at Sophia. Angry at myself." I frowned. "Why?" "Because I realized I had spent the entire evening watching a man try his best for someone who didn't even notice." Her eyes lifted again. I recognized that feeling. I understood immediately. Her marriage, 25 years, invisible, she continued. "After that night I started paying attention." "To what?" "To you." My chest tightened. "I noticed things," she said, "small things. How you always helped clean up after dinner without being asked. How you remembered details from conversations. How you talked about your work like it mattered." I looked down at my hands. No one had ever described me like that before. "I also noticed something else," she added. "What?" "How lonely you looked sometimes, even when Sophia was sitting right next to you." That sentence hit harder than anything she had said so far, because it was true, painfully true. Margaret reached across the table and gently touched my hand. The contact was soft, but steady. "I never planned to feel this way," she said quietly. "I fought it for a long time." "How long?" "About 2 years." 2 years, the number echoed in my head. All those holidays, all those family dinners. She had been carrying this silently the entire time. I pulled my hand back slowly, not because I didn't like the touch, because I needed to think. "This is complicated," I said. "Yes." "You're Sophia's mother." "Yes." "People will think I'm trying to get back at her." "They will. And you're okay with that?" Margaret didn't hesitate. "Yes." Her certainty surprised me. "Why?" She leaned forward slightly. "Because the only person I'm interested in right now is you." The air between us felt heavier suddenly. I thought about Sophia, about the emptiness of those last years, about the way she ended things without looking back. Then I looked at Margaret again, at the calm in her eyes, the quiet strength in the way she held herself. This wasn't reckless energy. This was something slower, something steadier. "I can't promise anything," I said carefully. "I'm still hurt." "I'm not asking for promises." "Then what are you asking for?" Her answer came without hesitation. "A chance." The word hung between us, a simple word, but it carried the weight of everything that could happen next. I sat there for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Okay." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, like she had been holding her breath. We didn't rush after that. Dinner stretched longer, conversation flowed easier. And when we walked out of the restaurant together, the air felt warmer somehow. Margaret reached for my hand, then paused, giving me the choice. I looked down at her hand, then slowly took it. Her fingers wrapped around mine. Firm, certain. And for the first time since Sophia ended things, I didn't feel like I was standing alone anymore. But somewhere in the back of my mind, one thought refused to go away. Because sooner or later, Sophia was going to find out. And when she did, everything was going to explode. The first rule Margaret and I agreed on was simple. No lies, but the second rule mattered even more. No rushing. If this thing between us was real, it deserved patience. Still, even slow choices can change a life faster than you expect. The first few weeks after that dinner felt strange. Not wrong, just quiet. We didn't act like some dramatic new couple. No big declarations, no posting photos, no telling friends, just small moments. Coffee before work, walks after sunset, long conversations that somehow stretched past midnight without either of us noticing. The first morning we met for coffee, I arrived early. Margaret was already there, sitting outside with 2 cups on the table. She had remembered how I took it. Black, no sugar. "That's a dangerous skill," I said, sitting down. "What is?" "Remembering details." She smiled slightly. "It's only dangerous if someone doesn't deserve the attention." I looked at her for a moment, still getting used to the idea that someone saw me like that. Our lives slowly started weaving together in quiet ways. She would text me pictures during the day, a book she thought I'd like, a street musician she heard while walking downtown. Sometimes just a single sentence, "Thinking about you today." Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady. And that steadiness did something strange to me. It made me relax. For 6 years with Sophia, I always felt like I was one mistake away from losing everything. With Margaret, it felt like I had already been chosen. 3 weeks into whatever we were becoming, Margaret invited me over for dinner. Her house was different than Sophia's apartment. Warm, lived in. Bookshelves full of half-read novels, soft lighting, music playing quietly in the background. It didn't feel staged. It felt real. She cooked pasta. I offered to help. She handed me a knife and a cutting board. "Slice the garlic," she said. "You trust me with a knife." "I've seen you assemble an entire crib for my niece," she replied. "You'll manage garlic." We worked side by side in the kitchen. No pressure, no awkwardness, just the comfortable silence of 2 people who didn't need to fill every moment with noise. Halfway through dinner, she asked something unexpected. "Are you angry with Sophia?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it, then shook my head slowly. "I was," I admitted, "but mostly I just feel clear now." "Clear? About what I deserve?" Margaret studied my face for a moment, then nodded like that answer meant something important to her. A month passed, then another. We never rushed anything physical, not because the attraction wasn't there. It was strong, but this didn't feel like the kind of connection you treated casually. One night while watching a movie on her couch, she leaned against my shoulder. Nothing dramatic, just rested there. I wrapped an arm around her without thinking, and something inside me settled. Like my life had finally slowed down enough to breathe. 4 months after that first dinner, Margaret asked me something that made my stomach tighten. "There's an art opening this Friday," she said one evening while we were walking along the river. "My firm is sponsoring it." I already knew where this was going. "You want me to come?" She nodded. It would mean people seeing us together. There it was, the line we had been quietly avoiding. Public, real, judged. I thought about it for a moment, then asked the only question that mattered. "Are you ready for that?" Margaret didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the water for a few seconds, then back at me. "I've spent too many years hiding parts of my life," she said quietly. "I don't want to do that anymore." That was enough for me. "I'll be there," I said. The gallery was packed, bright lights, people dressed like they belonged in magazines. The kind of place where everyone pretends to understand modern art. When Margaret and I walked in together, I felt it instantly. Eyes turning, conversations pausing, people doing silent math. Young man, older woman holding hands. Margaret squeezed my hand gently, but she didn't let go. A tall woman approached us first. Silver hair, sharp eyes. "Margaret," she said warmly. Then she looked at me. Her expression changed slightly. "This must be Ryan." Margaret nodded. "Ryan, this is Linda, one of my closest friends." Linda shook my hand, but the look she gave me wasn't casual. It was investigative, like she was measuring something. After a few minutes of polite conversation, Margaret was pulled away by someone from her firm. Linda stayed behind, watching me. Finally, she spoke. "You know people will talk," she said. "I assumed that." She tilted her head slightly. "Are you with her because my goddaughter broke your heart?" Direct, brutal, but fair. I didn't look away. "I'm with her because she makes me feel like I matter." Linda studied my face for several seconds, long enough to make the moment uncomfortable. Then she nodded slowly. "Good answer." She leaned closer slightly. "Margaret deserves someone real," she said quietly. "Don't prove me wrong." Then she walked away. The ride home was quiet, not tense, just thoughtful. Margaret kept her eyes on the road. "Linda interrogated you, didn't she?" she said after a while. "A little." "What did she ask?" "If I was using you to get back at Sophia." What? Margaret's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "And what did you say?" "The truth." She glanced at me briefly. "And that is?" "That you make me feel like I matter." Her expression softened. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she said something quietly. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in years." But the real test came a week later, when I brought her to meet my sister. Alicia's cookouts were loud, kids running around, music playing, the smell of grilled food everywhere. The moment Alicia opened the door and saw Margaret beside me, her face went through 3 emotions in 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, concern. "This is Margaret," I said, "my girlfriend." The word felt heavy when I said it. Real. The afternoon was polite, but careful. Too careful. Alicia asked Margaret about work. Margaret asked about Alicia's kids. Everyone smiled a little too much. After dinner, Alicia pulled me aside near the back porch. "What are you doing?" she asked quietly. I sighed. I knew this was coming. "She's Sophia's mother, Ryan." "I'm aware. And she's older. She treats me better than anyone ever has." Alicia studied my face, looking for something. Finally she sighed. "I just want you to be happy." "I am." She pulled me into a hug. "Then I'll try to understand." On the drive home, Margaret was quiet. I could feel the question sitting in the car with us. Finally she asked it. "Your sister thinks I'm too old for you, doesn't she?" I didn't lie. "She just needs time." Margaret nodded, but her eyes stayed on the road. And I could tell something deeper had started to worry her. I didn't realize how serious that fear was, until the night she looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked a question that would change everything. "Ryan, are you with me because you want me, or because it feels like revenge?" The question hit harder than anything else so far, because suddenly I understood something. She wasn't afraid of the world judging us. She was afraid of losing me, and I realized in that moment. I had never once asked myself what would happen if she was the one who got hurt. But before I could answer her question, my phone buzzed on the table, a message from a name I hadn't seen in months, Sophia, and the text was only one sentence. "We need to talk about my mother." What? My phone sat on the table between us like a loaded gun. Sophia's name glowed on the screen. Margaret saw it immediately. Her eyes didn't move from the message. "We need to talk about my mother." For a moment neither of us spoke. The room felt smaller. Margaret's voice came out quiet. "You should answer her." I looked up. "You're sure?" She nodded slowly. This was always going to happen eventually. I picked up the phone, but my thumb hovered over the screen. Sophia hadn't contacted me in 4 months, not once. And now this was the first thing she had to say. Not hello, not how are you, just a demand. I typed back. "What about?" The reply came almost instantly. "You and her." Margaret let out a slow breath. "I suppose the secret part of our life is officially over." What? I set the phone down. "We don't have to meet her," I said. Margaret shook her head. "Yes, we do." Her voice was calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "She deserves honesty," she continued, "and I won't hide anymore." We agreed to meet Sophia 2 days later. Neutral ground, a small park halfway between her apartment and Margaret's house. The entire drive there my stomach felt tight, not because I still loved Sophia, that feeling was gone, but because I knew this conversation had the power to burn down everything around it. Margaret sat beside me quietly. Her hand rested on her lap, not shaking, not nervous, just prepared. "You don't have to defend me," she said softly. "I'm not planning to." She gave me a small look. "Ryan." "I mean it," I said. "I'm not defending you, I'm standing with you." That made her smile, but only for a second. Sophia was already waiting when we arrived. She stood near a bench with her arms crossed, the moment she saw us walking toward her together. Her face hardened. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked thinner, sharper somehow, like anger had been slowly carving new lines into her face. "Well," she said as we stopped in front of her, "this is surreal." Her eyes moved between us, slowly, carefully. "You two actually did it." Margaret's voice stayed steady. "Sophia." "No," Sophia snapped. "You don't get to start with my name like everything is normal." People walking through the park glanced over. I could already feel the attention building. Sophia turned to me. "You really went there, Ryan." What? I kept my voice calm. "You broke up with me." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Her eyes flashed. "The point is you started sleeping with my mother." Margaret stepped forward slightly. "We didn't start like that." Sophia laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. "Oh, please." Margaret didn't raise her voice. "We started with honesty." Sophia looked at her like she had just heard the most ridiculous sentence in the world. "Honesty. You waited until after I dumped him to confess. You'd been emotionally stalking him for 2 years." That word hung in the air. Stalking. Margaret didn't flinch. "I never crossed a line while you were together." Sophia's eyes burned. "But you wanted to." Margaret didn't answer, and that silence said enough. Sophia shook her head slowly. "I can't believe this." She looked at me again. "Did you even think about how this would look?" "I did," I said, "and you still did it." "Yes." Her voice turned quieter, more dangerous. "So you're in love with her now?" The truth was I didn't know how to answer that. What I felt for Margaret wasn't the loud, reckless kind of love people talk about in movies. It was calmer, stronger, but still growing. "I care about her," I said honestly. Sophia's eyes flicked toward her mother. "And you?" she asked Margaret. Are you proud of this? Margaret finally spoke with more emotion. I'm proud of choosing happiness. Sophia's laugh came again, bitter. You chose my ex-boyfriend. I chose someone who treats people with kindness. Sophia stepped closer. You chose someone younger than me. And it's humiliating. The word exploded out of her. Finally, the real wound, people whispering, friends asking questions, the embarrassment she couldn't control. Margaret's expression softened. Sophia, this was never about humiliating you. But that's exactly what it did. Sophia's eyes filled with angry tears. You destroyed our family for this. Margaret's voice stayed steady. Our family was already broken long before this. Sophia stared at her mother, like she didn't recognize the woman standing in front of her. For years Margaret had been careful, polite, quiet. Today she looked like someone who had finally stopped apologizing for existing. Sophia turned to me one last time. You really think this will last? I answered honestly, I don't know. She blinked, probably expecting something more dramatic. But I know one thing, I continued. What? For the first time in my life, I'm not begging someone to choose me. That landed. Sophia's mouth tightened. She looked at her mother again. You're dead to me, she said quietly. Then she turned and walked away just like that. No goodbye, no looking back. Margaret stayed standing in the same spot long after Sophia disappeared down the path. Her shoulders slowly sagged. I stepped closer. You okay? She didn't answer right away. Then suddenly her breath broke, and she started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears she had been holding back the entire time. I wrapped my arms around her. Right there in the middle of the park, people walked past us. Some stared. Some pretended not to notice. I didn't care, because in that moment something became clear. Loving someone sometimes means standing beside them while the world judges both of you. After a few minutes, Margaret wiped her eyes. She meant it, she said quietly. She really might never speak to me again. I didn't try to fix that. Some things can't be fixed with words. Instead, I squeezed her hand. We'll figure it out. She nodded slowly, but her eyes looked tired, like the cost of honesty had finally arrived. The next few weeks proved just how expensive that cost would be. News spread faster than either of us expected. Margaret's relatives started calling, some angry, some disappointed. A few simply stopped speaking to her. At work, people whispered when she walked past. The same thing happened to me. Friends asked questions that sounded more like accusations. My sister Alicia stayed supportive, but even she looked worried sometimes. Through all of it, Margaret and I stayed close. Late-night conversations, quiet dinners, doctor visits. The thought stopped my brain. I looked at her. Wait. Margaret froze slightly. What? You just said doctor visits. She looked down, then back at me. There was something nervous in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. I need to tell you something, she said. My stomach tightened immediately. What is it? Margaret took a slow breath. I went to the doctor last week. Fear crawled up my spine. Are you okay? Yes, she said quickly. Nothing is wrong. Then she hesitated and added one sentence that made my entire world tilt. But something unexpected happened. I felt my pulse start to race. What kind of unexpected? Margaret's hands slowly moved to rest against her stomach, and when she looked up at me again, her voice was barely a whisper. Ryan, I'm pregnant. The words didn't make sense, not at first. My brain tried to reject them entirely, because Margaret was 51, because this wasn't supposed to happen, because nothing about our story had ever followed normal rules. But the look in her eyes told me one thing clearly. This was real, and our lives had just changed again. For a few seconds after Margaret said the words, my brain refused to process them. Pregnant. The word floated in the room like it belonged to someone else's life, not ours, not hers. Margaret watched my face carefully, like she was bracing for impact. I know it sounds impossible, she said quickly. I thought it was menopause too. That's why I went to the doctor. but they ran tests and then more tests. My mouth felt dry. How far? 10 weeks. 10 weeks. That meant this had started almost right after we began seeing each other. My mind scrambled to catch up. Margaret kept talking, nervous now. The doctor said it's rare, but it happens. Sometimes the body just isn't finished yet. She gave a weak half laugh. I guess mine didn't get the memo. I finally found my voice. You're serious? She nodded. Tears had already started forming in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Ryan. That sentence snapped something inside my chest. Why are you apologizing? Because this is complicated enough already, she said. Because I'm 51 and pregnant. Because people will think you're trapped. I'm not trapped. You didn't ask for this. Her voice cracked slightly. You're supposed to be building a life with someone younger, someone who can give you children without risk or judgment. I stepped closer. Stop. She looked up. I mean it, I said gently. Stop apologizing. But Ryan. No. I took her hands. They were shaking. I spent 6 years asking Sophia to even talk about having kids. Margaret blinked. 6 years of hearing the same answers. Maybe someday, not right now. My career comes first. 6 years of waiting for a future that never arrived. And now, I said quietly, the one thing I wanted most is sitting in front of me, terrified that I don't want it. Margaret's tears spilled over. You're not angry. I'm shocked, I admitted, and scared. High-risk pregnancies at my age are complicated. I figured. But you're not regretting this. I looked at her, really looked. The woman who had risked her family, her reputation, and her comfort just to live honestly. The woman who had told me I mattered when I didn't believe it anymore. No, I said, because for the first time in my life, someone didn't hesitate to choose me. Margaret pulled me into a hug, and for a moment we both just stood there shaking, laughing a little, crying a little. Trying to accept that the world had just shifted again. Reality started hitting over the next few days. The word pregnant changed everything. Doctor appointments appeared on the calendar, specialists, blood tests, ultrasounds. The phrase high risk followed every conversation. Margaret tried to stay calm, but I could see the worry in her eyes, so when her next appointment came, I didn't even hesitate. I'm coming with you, I said. You don't have to take time off work. I'm coming. The specialist's waiting room was full of younger couples, women in their 20s, men holding ultrasound photos like trophies. When Margaret and I walked in together, I could feel the silent calculations happening around us. Older woman, younger man, pregnancy. None of it fit the picture people expected. I ignored them. Margaret's hand stayed in mine the entire time. When the nurse finally called us back, my chest felt tight. The ultrasound room was dim, machines humming quietly. The doctor was calm and kind, no judgment in her voice. She explained everything carefully, risks, monitoring, possibilities. Then the technician started the ultrasound. At first the screen looked like nothing. Blurry shapes, gray shadows. I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then the doctor pointed. Right there, she said softly, that's the baby. My breath caught. A tiny shape moved on the screen, small, fragile, alive, and there's the heartbeat. The sound filled the room, fast, strong, real. Margaret squeezed my hand so hard it almost hurt, but I didn't let go. 10 weeks, a life already growing. When the appointment ended, we sat in the car outside the clinic for a long time without speaking. Finally, Margaret said the sentence we had both been avoiding. We need to tell Sophia. My stomach tightened. Of course we did. There was no hiding this. Sooner or later she would hear from someone else, and that would be worse. It can't be a text, Margaret said. No. It has to be face to face. I nodded slowly. Okay. 2 days later we stood outside Sophia's apartment, the same door where she ended 6 years of my life. Margaret knocked. The door opened. Sophia froze the moment she saw us together. Her eyes moved from me to her mother, and something dark crossed her face. What do you want? Margaret stepped inside calmly. We need to talk." Sophia didn't argue. She stepped aside stiffly. The living room looked exactly the same. Same couch, same yellow blanket, same framed lake photo, but the feeling in the room was completely different now. Sophia sat down across from us, arms crossed, waiting. Margaret didn't waste time. "There's something important you need to know." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "If this is about your midlife romance with my ex." "I'm pregnant." The words cut through the room like glass. Sophia blinked, then laughed, not happily, the kind of laugh people use when reality doesn't make sense. "That's not funny." Margaret stayed calm. "It's true." Sophia's smile faded slowly. "You're serious?" "Yes." Sophia's eyes moved toward me. "You're the father?" "Yes." The room went very quiet. Then the explosion came. "This is disgusting." Sophia shot to her feet. "You did this to hurt me." "That's not why." "Oh, please." She snapped at me. "You waited 4 months and then decided to knock up my mother." Margaret's voice stayed steady. "This isn't revenge." "You expect me to believe that?" "I chose honesty." Sophia pointed at her. "You chose betrayal." Margaret didn't flinch. "I spent years teaching you not to settle for a life that makes you unhappy." "That doesn't mean stealing my boyfriend." "I didn't steal him." Sophia turned to me. "You're unbelievable." "I didn't plan this," I said. "Of course you didn't." Her laugh came again, cold. "You just accidentally started a family with my mother." The words sounded insane when she said them, but they were still true. Sophia's anger slowly shifted into something else, something colder. "If that baby is born," she said quietly, "I want nothing to do with it." Margaret's face tightened slightly, but she didn't argue. Sophia looked at both of us one last time. "You two deserve each other." Then she pointed toward the door. "Get out." Outside the apartment, Margaret leaned against the wall, like the strength had drained out of her. For a moment she didn't speak. Then her shoulders started shaking. I pulled her into my arms. "She's gone," Margaret whispered. "I lost my daughter." I held her tighter. "You didn't lose her." "She said she's done with me." "She's angry." "She meant it." Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But standing there holding Margaret while she cried, I realized something. This story wasn't just about love anymore. It was about consequences, about standing by the life we had chosen, even when the world decided it was wrong. And as the weeks passed, the judgment only got louder. But none of it compared to the moment when Margaret woke me up in the middle of the night, terrified. Because something suddenly felt very wrong with the pregnancy. Margaret shook my shoulder hard. "Ryan, wake up." Her voice sounded wrong, not calm, not steady, panicked. I sat up instantly. The bedroom was dark except for the streetlight leaking through the blinds. "What's wrong?" Margaret was already sitting upright, one hand pressed against her stomach. "I don't know," she said breathlessly. "Something feels wrong." My chest tightened. "What kind of wrong?" She shook her head. "I can't explain it. I feel like something isn't right with the baby." That was all I needed to hear. I was out of bed in seconds. "Get dressed. We're going to the hospital." The drive through Austin felt endless. The streets were empty, streetlights sliding across the windshield. Margaret sat in the passenger seat, breathing slowly, trying to stay calm. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other on her knee. "You're okay," I kept saying. "We're okay." But inside, fear sat heavy in my chest. Not loud fear, quiet fear. The kind that whispers everything you might lose. The hospital lights were harsh and bright. Nurses moved quickly once they heard Margaret's age and pregnancy stage. High risk. That phrase again. Tests started immediately. Monitors. Blood pressure checks. Ultrasound machines rolling into the room. Margaret squeezed my hand, hard. "You're still here," she whispered. "Of course I am." She looked at me like she needed to hear it again. "Ryan, if something happens." "Nothing's happening," I said gently. We're not jumping to worst cases. But the truth was my heart was racing. Hours passed, tests, waiting, doctors whispering. Finally, a specialist came in. She studied the monitor for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "False alarm," she said. I felt the tension leave my body all at once. Margaret let out a breath she had been holding. But the doctor continued, "We're getting close." "How close?" I asked. "Very." 2 weeks later my phone rang. Well, I was halfway up a ladder at work. Margaret's name flashed on the screen. The moment I heard her voice I knew. "Ryan," she said calmly, "it's time." My tools hit the floor before she finished the sentence. I drove like the road had disappeared behind me. By the time I reached the hospital, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely sign the paperwork. When I walked into the delivery room, Margaret looked exhausted. But when she saw me, relief washed across her face. "You made it," she whispered. "I wasn't going to miss this." I took her hand and stayed there. The hours blurred together, nurses moving quickly, machines beeping, doctors checking monitors, Margaret breathing through each contraction. I had wired entire buildings, worked 30 feet in the air without fear. But nothing had ever scared me like watching someone you love fight through pain you can't take away. At one point, Margaret looked at me and asked something that broke my heart. "Are you still okay?" Even then she was worried about me. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I told her. Then things changed. The doctor's tone shifted. Margaret's blood pressure was rising. More nurses entered the room. Instructions came faster. The quiet fear inside my chest grew louder, but Margaret stayed focused, strong. Her hand never let go of mine. "Ryan," she whispered during one contraction. "I'm here. Don't leave. I'm not going anywhere." And then, a cry, sharp, small, perfect. The sound cut through everything. The doctor smiled. "She's here." My vision blurred. I didn't even realize I was crying until tears hit my shirt. "A girl," the doctor said. They placed the baby in Margaret's arms, tiny, red-faced, alive. Margaret looked at her like she couldn't believe she existed. "We'll call her Lily," she said softly. I stared at the little human who had already turned our lives upside down, and suddenly everything felt right. The next few days passed in a blur of exhaustion and joy. Margaret recovered slowly, but she was strong. Lily was small but healthy. I slept in a hospital chair, barely sleeping at all, just watching them breathe. Messages started arriving, some warm, some cold. Sophia's name never appeared. Margaret pretended not to notice, but I saw the way she looked at her phone sometimes. Hope has a stubborn way of staying alive. When we brought Lily home, life changed overnight. Feedings every few hours, diapers, laundry that never seemed to end. Margaret moved slower while she healed, so I learned everything: swaddling, bottle warming, walking the living room at 3 in the morning when Lily refused to sleep. I had never felt so tired or so proud. A week later, someone knocked on the door. I opened it and froze. Sophia stood there. She looked smaller. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't slept much. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I looked over my shoulder. Margaret sat on the couch with Lily sleeping against her chest. She saw Sophia. For a moment the room felt frozen in time. Then Margaret nodded once. Sophia stepped inside slowly. She stood a few feet away from the couch, staring at the baby. Like she wasn't sure she was real. "Is that her?" Sophia whispered. Margaret nodded. "Her name is Lily." Sophia's voice shook. "Can I hold her?" Margaret hesitated, just for a moment, then gently placed Lily in Sophia's arms. Sophia looked down at the tiny face staring back at her, and suddenly she broke, crying hard. "I'm sorry," she said between breaths. "I was angry." Margaret stayed quiet. "I felt replaced," Sophia continued. "I pushed Ryan away and then watched him build something real without me." Her voice cracked. I didn't know how to handle it. Margaret reached out and touched her arm. "You were hurt." Sophia nodded, then she looked at me. "I'm sorry, Ryan," she said quietly, "not just for the breakup. For not seeing you." I nodded. "That means more than you know." Sophia handed Lily back carefully. like she was returning something fragile. Before leaving, she hugged her mother. A long time. When the door closed behind her, the house felt lighter. Margaret leaned against me. For the first time in months. She looked peaceful. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. It became something better, full, messy, real. Days started blending together in a rhythm built around Lily. Early mornings, soft cries in the dark, tiny hands wrapped around my finger. Margaret moved through the house with a calm she had never had before, like she finally believed she deserved happiness. Some people never accepted our story. Some friends disappeared. A few relatives never called again, but others surprised us. Neighbors brought meals. My sister Alicia babysat. Sophia visited sometimes, carefully, slowly rebuilding something with her mother. Months later, Margaret and I sat on the porch one warm evening while Lily slept inside. The city hummed quietly in the distance. Margaret leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever think about that first day?" she asked. "The doorbell. The card on your counter." I smiled slightly. "All the time." "Me too." She sighed softly. "I spent most of my life doing what people expected," she said. "Being quiet, being reasonable." She looked up at me. "Choosing you felt like choosing myself for the first time." I looked at the woman beside me, the one who refused to disappear anymore, the one who walked into my broken life and told me I mattered. And I realized something simple. Love doesn't always arrive the way you expect it to. Sometimes it shows up after everything falls apart. Sometimes it rings your doorbell when you think your life is over. My girlfriend left me. Her mother chose me. And somehow, that broken ending became the beginning of the best life I never saw coming. Because some promises don't start with wedding rings. They start with someone simply deciding to stay.